Recently, we had learned that Yoxron was behind the corruption of Galakrond, but looks like there was only one side of the actual story. We had delved deep into the experimental halls of the Titan Keeper tier, where we had discovered that not only he had tabs on the dragon aspects and their creation, but he had also heavily experimented on the native proto-dragons. He infused them with various elements, made various observations, and then almost certainly infused one with the wrong element that created a catastrophe that was Galakrond that ultimately opened the gateway for Yoxron. Furthermore, we had the possible information about the Primal Incarnates being a potentially failed experiment and a prototype, and this might be the actual reason for their war against the dragons and what will be happening in the very near future. So what is all this new information? If you guys are looking to buy Dragonflight or anything Warcraft related, Gamiibo has some amazing sales that you can check out with my link. On top of that, you can get software, gift cards, various games at crazy prices. Best of all, you can use my code DORON to add yet another discount to your purchase, so make sure to click my link below, check out Gamiibo, and grab some amazing deals. So, the lore has definitely changed, but the lore has also been quite vague in the past as well. This entire Galakrond storyline was explored both in Wrath of the Lich King, where we had found the bones of Galakrond, and in the Dawn of the Aspects, where there was the entire storyline about him and his hunt. The thing is, even back then, we were not really getting mixed signals, but sort of like half information. First, the dragons told us that Galakrond was the progenitor of dragonkind, of the dragon aspects, whatever that means, and from the book, we had learned that Tyr blamed himself for Galakrond as if it was his fault, but he never really elaborated why that was really his fault. Well, now things are starting to take a different turn and make a bit more sense, and we might be kind of figuring what is actually going on. First, we went to the Dragon Isles and learned about the actual dragon origin, and second, we went into the halls of Tyr, like his actual headquarters, where we not only read some of his memories, discovered his experiments, but ultimately where we had actually discovered Tyr himself. Sort of. As you may be aware, the current storyline is that we're trying to get the discs and the memories, so an actual revival of Tyr could be a significant possibility, maybe even as soon as 10.1, which is going to be just a huge fountain of new Titan lore information. However, even more interestingly, we ran into huge information about the actual origin of the dragon aspects, the incarnates, and the Galakrond as well, with some huge implications. Possibly the biggest info thus far, the biggest lore reveal of the past year was that it was Yoxron who had created Galakrond and the monstrosity that he was, but with this information, it seems like the situation is a lot more nuanced and a lot more complex than, you know, just Yoxron corrupted a random dragon and that is it, and it seems like it was Tyr that goofed around with this, and Yoxron had only just exploited the opportunity, which would definitely be something an old god would do. So let's dig into the info that we have. Now, as we do the questline in the Halls of Titans, naturally, as you would guess, we visit multiple Titan halls. In one of them, we run into Tyr's experiments on the regular proto-drakes, and in the other, we get information about the actual aspects and their history. I've already covered this second hall, as this is where we got info about Alexstrasza's undead brother Drelad. That could become a possible villain in this expansion, and there's a whole video on the channel that you can check out on that. However, the first hall is potentially even more interesting, as we found Tyr had been up to some things that no one really knew about but himself. I kind of feel like because of all this new Titan information about how they're not nice, we look kind of at every single thing they had done with evil lens, but let's just say objectively, what Tyr has been doing hasn't exactly been nice. In fact, it will be something some sort of a villain would do. The Titans are obviously an alien force to Azeroth, and this guy literally established headquarters in lands that are not his, and he has been abducting native elemental dragons, and he has been infusing them with various powers, and is making some observations. He's essentially going with the logic, let's try this, let's try that, until something breaks, and looks like something actually broke, as was the case with Galakrond. So we see multiple scenarios, but almost all of it involves around him experimenting with native elemental energies and infusing various native dragons with it. For example, here's what he says in regards to a water experiment that he did. Infused with the element of water, this proto-dragon has lost its fire-breathing capabilities and gained an equally lethal ability in its stead, the frozen possibilities of ice. So this guy essentially took a fire fire drake turned him into a water one, I'm guessing by force, and this is the conclusion he came up with. Then he says, the fact that a proto-dragon's complete inversion of their elemental tendency is not only possible but so thorough generates an intriguing thought exercise. So essentially, Tyr emboldens himself and decides that there is a lot more work to do, similar things such as this. Furthermore, he infuses a drake with earth elements and realizes that his scale density increased, his flexibility lowers, so this guy is literally just like customizing his own drake. He then infuses a dragon with the element of air, which gives him the ability to express gusts of wind from his body, which creates a powerful weapon. And in regards to this, Tyr says this: the fact that this does not result in an equal but opposing force applied to the dragon implies the process is innately magical as opposed to mechanical. He realizes the dragons can be enhanced by the elements to create powerful weapons, but then Tyr states the most interesting out of all the quotes: is there an element or even an energy that, given the appropriate conduit, vessel, and time, proto-dragons are unable to integrate? I think, and I would go out as far as to say that yes, there is one, and we don't really learn what it is, but I think history can tell us, and that is obviously Galakrond. Tyr goofed around by creating these little dragon projects, these dragon pets, until he tried infusing the wrong magic with a wrong proto-dragon, which opened the gateway for Yogg-Saron to influence this creation, and this in turn created a huge headache for him and big trouble for Azeroth in turn. This actually really goes in line with the previous information that we had known, that it didn't really make all that much sense back in the dawn of the Aspects. For example, back in the day, Tyr even told the Aspects that he blames himself for Galakrond's mutation and that it was never intended, and he even said that his fellow keepers didn't want to help him, according to him, because they're not tied to Azeroth natively, as you know, obviously the dragons are, and he's talking to the dragons, so he's kinda flattering them. But I think the reality is that he kinda just goofed around with this experiment. He's been abducting these dragons, created a big problem, and now the other keepers blamed it on him and just wanted him to clean it up. Like, they wanted none of his mess. Tyr even says that he never intended this path and that Galakrond should have never journeyed in that direction. Now, the thing is, as we can learn from this questline, Tyr has been infusing these proto-dragons with all sorts of energies, realized how it works, emboldens himself, and then messes probably with the wrong stuff. If I was to guess, I would say two scenarios are likely, and both are definitely possible. Either he tried to use the mysterious spirit element that could also be tied to decay, which is present on the Dragon Isles right now, and the Azeroth World Soul, because it was said that Azeroth had consumed the spirit, so it's highly likely related to Azeroth, and he just messed the experiment and it really got out of hand. Or his ultimate goal was to infuse all the dragons with arcane, but he first had to experiment with the elements that are natural to them to just kinda figure out how the dragons work. So he rushed this one, tried turning Galakrond into an arcane dragon, and put arcane in the water source and got Galakrond to drink it, but he didn't know Yogg-Saron also had access to this water source, and that is really how it got out of hand. He learned from this mistake and then subsequently created the Aspects as we know he had created them, and honestly, I think this theory is actually the most likely one because it really is heavily supported by the other information. Back in the day, the Aspect said that Galakrond was the progenitor of dragonkind. In this case, when they say dragonkind, they mean Titan dragonkind, not the actual proto-dragons. Galakrond might have actually been the first dragon Aspect that was a failed experiment that fell under Yogg-Saron's influence, and subsequently the Aspects were created from his mistakes. However, this brings us to an even more interesting scenario that people have talked about, and that is that the original Primal Incarnates are actually a prototype. Tyr's experiment that he wanted to get rid of, but ultimately that backfired against him. My theory is that the Titan's plan was to infuse the entire planet with arcane and create arcane dragons, but to do that he kinda had to first learn the mechanisms and how everything actually works. Titans, as we know, are not all-knowing. For example, we know they brute-forced Y'Shaarj, which created a huge mess, and then they had to take a sophisticated approach by imprisoning them. I feel like this was kind of a similar scenario, just on a much smaller scale. So Tyr started infusing them, learning about them, and these first dragons were the ones that we see, the Primal Incarnates. This kinda even makes sense when you go into these halls because the way the rooms are actually put forward. First, the proto-dragons out there, then we have the actual Aspects. Seeing that there are 5 Aspects and 4 Incarnates, Galakrond may have been the first Incarnate that he tried to elevate, but that kind of failed, and now he just had to discard the entire batch, which might have fueled that massive civil war that Alexstrasza was talking about. Of course, at this point in time, we can't claim this for certain, but it definitely opens a really interesting possibility for future story development. I'm guessing the information will be revealed to us as we resurrect Tyr or learn from his memories, but in it is almost certain that he was experimenting on Galakrond, and I'm almost certain this experiment is going to be the main focal point of Dragonflight and what is actually going to happen in this expansion. We have failed Titan experiments, native elements, old gods deep underground, so really it is only a matter of time before all of this combines into one and culminates into the actual storyline. Thank you for watching. Check out Rebellion Betrayals by clicking on the screen, and check out Orion's Academy for videos on real world history. See you next time.